My name is Annette Schönholzer and I'm based in Basel, Switzerland. I started working for Art Basel 12 years ago in 2002, which was the year when the first fair took place in Miami Beach. And my first day at work with Art Basel was actually on the beach in Miami Beach, building containers for one of the sectors called Art Positions. I worked then as a show manager for 5 years, building that show under Sam Keller as the director of Art Basel. Later, when Sam Keller left to go to the Fondation Baylor, I became co-director with Mark Spiegler for another 5 years. And the past 2 years until October of 2014, I was director of new initiatives for Art Basel after building the brand to go to Hong Kong. Miami Beach and Miami, the whole area changed a lot during the period of the last 12 years. Part of the reason that Art Basel decided to go to that place was because there were fantastic collections there. The Rubel collection, the De La Cruz collection, the Cisneros collection, all of these collectors, and Norman Bremen, of course, the Bremen collection, were private collections and collectors who were very, very interested in bringing an art fair to a place like this. However, in terms of cultural institutions, there wasn't that much going on at the time, and there also were very, very few galleries. So over the past 12 years, a lot has happened. Many of the private collectors have opened their homes to the public, or they actually have built spaces in which their collections can be seen. The Miami Art Museum built a building by Herzog de Meuron, which was opened last year. There are over 60 galleries in the region now in the meantime. There's much more of an artistic scene. Schools have put in more art and design classes or professorships. So I think that that bringing Art Basel to a location like Miami has changed the cultural scene quite a bit over the course of the years. Although I might say that I don't think it's only due to the art fair. An art fair is only there for 5 to 6 days. You bring in a lot of people and then you leave again. But somehow it managed to change a little bit of how people think about the arts and to how they incorporate that into their own lives. In the beginning, the fair was actually a little bit smaller than it is today. Now it has roughly 260 galleries participating. It started around 200 galleries. There were much, much less halls at the time, much more condensed space. I think it was for European galleries quite a challenge to bring their artists to Miami at the time. It was a real question what the Western American market really wanted to see. And so a lot of the more demanding conceptual work coming from Europe wasn't easily understood at the time. That over the course of the years changed. It meant that some of the galleries started bringing sometimes more accessible work, but on the other hand, I think that the public there, the audience, became more and more involved in the arts and they began to understand and engage in it in a different way. So it's been an amazing development of the way that art has been put on display and the way that people have perceived it and started buying the art. With the development of Art Basel and also with bringing on and expanding the fair to Asia, there was a game change in the way that the fairs were conceptualized. The reason being that it doesn't make sense to do the same fair in 3 different places 3 times a year. The whole sense of going into different regions is to give those regions their individual flavor. So whilst Basel has become maybe even more European over the years, Miami has become more Latin American over the years, and the Hong Kong Fair, which is the newest edition, is truly an Asian fair. 50% of the exhibiting galleries are Asian or are Western galleries who have a gallery in the Asian areas. So the idea is that these fairs should be distinctly different. It's not about having the same types of galleries in every place and seeing the same things. That just wouldn't really make a lot of sense. It would not create an interesting situation. Going to Hong Kong was a huge challenge because the Asian culture is completely different. And when we talk about Asia, Asia is a huge place. There's so many different countries. Each of them has their own culture. Many people in the beginning thought it was all about China, and whilst China truly has the highest wealth at the moment, it's the cultures that come into play in combining those inside a fair that is the biggest challenge for a fair that has primarily been active in the Western Hemisphere. So learning about the differences as far as you can from an outsider standpoint, engaging in that, respecting that, and still creating a high-level art event was one of the biggest challenges to overcome. Every art fair tries to create the largest attraction inside the fair itself. So it's a selection process who is present at the fair that is the core of the business of what an art fair does. However, everything you do around it is supposed to allow the visitors, the collectors, the people, the curators, the museum directors coming from all over the world to experience more of what is regional. So as an art fair organizer, what you do is you try to be in contact with the local people that really live there all the time. And you try to find out what are the most interesting things that are happening at the time during that period that your fair is happening. And often a lot of institutions or artists open their studios with special programming during that period because the art fair is there. So it's a collaboration with the local scene to allow for that to happen. And in Hong Kong it's particularly interesting because that art scene is not big, it's not huge. There also are not that many local collectors there. Space is very expensive, it's very scarce, which means that it's not a comparable situation to Miami, not a comparable situation to Basel, which has many, many cultural institutions. So for every fair you have to find out the best way to create additional programming that is part of where you're coming from. It's a very interesting question. I don't think there's an easy answer to the question why Art Basel has continued to be a very high quality fair, or the best fair in the world, I suppose, at the time. I do think it is because partially the pioneering aspect of Art Basel. Art Basel had the courage to go out and launch a Miami fair 12 years ago. It had the courage to go to Asia and take over a fair in Hong Kong and then create like an additional hub there. I think that is a very important thing. I also do think that it's always been that Art Basel has always been about bringing the best of the work, the best of the galleries, the best of the artists, and the most serious collectors to one place at one time, and trying to create an experience that is really spectacular and very unique. And I think these are part of the reasons why Art Basel has been able to be as successful as it is. Selection committees are very difficult to put together. Selection committees have an incredibly high responsibility in an art fair. Of course, they get to see a lot of what's going on in the art world, which makes it interesting for them to be part of a committee. But I can safely say that the 3 committees that work for Art Basel are very serious about their work, that they try to be very fair about their selections, and that challenge has become much, much bigger because the world has become so big in contemporary art, meaning 10 years ago, often galleries had a fair chance of seeing most of the galleries that they were selecting to participate in a fair, whereas today, with whole countries opening up to contemporary art, it's very, very hard for them to travel that far to actually see the galleries themselves. So they have to do a lot of additional research to fulfill that responsibility. It's very hard to speak about trends. As fair organizers, that's what's the next trend? What are we going to see at the next fair? The fact is this: you select galleries. You select them with their programs, and the gallerists are the actual curators of the fair. They bring what they think is at the moment the most promising art, the most important art, the highest quality that they have in their galleries. So it's very hard for art fair organizers to make any projections or prognosis of what's going to happen in the future. I do think what we will be seeing is probably more Islamic art. We will probably also be seeing more African art because the eyes are on what's going on the continent. So there will be more pockets of interest there. There will be more that will be seen. There will also be more research done in those regions. And I think that's great because it means that we'll be seeing much more of what's going on in contemporary art around the world. Your question is a very tough question. I think that there is a huge proliferation of art fairs at the time being. I'm very sure that, at least my feeling is that over the next 5 years there will be shifts, there will be changes, and you can already see them happening. I think regional fairs will have more importance, provided they do not try to be the same as international art fairs, because then they can service like a different type of interest. They can go more in depth rather in going into breadth, and I think those are important things. If you want to learn more about certain markets, You don't learn that much at an international art fair at this level because you're looking at a certain sector of art. So if good things happen, positive things happen in the art fair world, that would be one of them. Personally, I think there are too many art fairs, but at the same time, these are market-driven things. There's no control over what really happens. It will have to sort itself out over time. Personally, I've always felt biennales have always been commercial. It's something that people never wanted to believe. They started as commercial events. Art at biennales has always been for sale. Now it's probably just more openly presented in a way because the galleries actually do carry a lot of the weight of making sure that the artists can present the work at biennials, because the governments are not able to really support it in that way. So biennials are part of like the larger makeup of what the art market is about.